What if everything you think you know about Hollywood's golden age was a beautiful, dangerous lie? Tonight we peel back 20 of the slickest cons the studio's ever sold. Hoaxes so bold they rewrote birth certificates, faked weddings, buried crimes, and even rigged the evening news. Follow the money, follow the gossip, and, most of all, follow the fear that the truth might cost a fortune at the box office. The Phantom Birth Certificate. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer didn't just tweak Frances Gumm's age when she became Judy Garland. They executed a full-scale identity reinvention. Studio lawyers systematically destroyed original documents and fabricated new ones, placing them strategically in county archives where reporters might check. When MGM released The Wizard of Oz in 1939, their publicity department circulated press kits with strict instructions. Mention Sweet 15 or don't get future exclusives. The deception went deeper still. Garland's mother, Ethel, desperate for her daughter's success, collaborated willingly, signing falsified affidavits. When concerned journalists attempted verification by contacting the Garland family's minister in Grand Rapids, they unknowingly spoke to an MGM publicist who had been positioned at the rectory's phone for weeks. The studio made similar alterations to dozens of stars, removing Archibald Leach's working-class British origins to create Cary Grant, transforming Lucille Lesueur into the aristocratic-sounding Joan Crawford, and most famously, erasing Norma Jean Baker's unstable childhood to create the orphaned innocent Marilyn Monroe. The Hollywood machine understood that malleability began with paperwork. Louis B. Mayer personally instructed his legal department to maintain 2 separate personnel files on each contract player, the authentic documentation locked in his private safe and the press-ready version accessible to the studio's publicity department. For Garland specifically, the age deception allowed MGM to work her well beyond child labor limitations, scheduling 18-hour days that would have been illegal had her true age been known, while simultaneously marketing her as the plucky, fresh-faced girl next door. Recoloring Rita and erasing Merle. Columbia Pictures didn't just tweak Rita Hayworth's identity, they systematically dismantled it. Born Margarita Carmen Cancino to a Spanish father and Irish-American mother, Hayworth's transformation began with a painful series of electrolysis treatments 3 times weekly for nearly 2 years. Studio head Harry Cohn personally selected technicians to slowly reshape her natural widow's peak hairline, raising it by over an inch to conform to Anglo beauty standards, a procedure so excruciating that Hayworth later described it as torture. Meanwhile, makeup artists developed specialized foundations to lighten her olive complexion. Columbia's publicity department crafted an elaborate backstory, emphasizing her mother's Irish heritage while downplaying her father's Spanish roots entirely. Internal studio memos, later discovered in Columbia's archives, explicitly instructed staff to never mention her Mexican heritage or fluent Spanish. Similarly, producer Alexander Korda orchestrated an even more complex deception for Anglo-Indian actress Merle Oberon. Born Estelle Merle O'Brien Thompson in Bombay to an Anglo-Ceylonese mother and British father, her Indian heritage was completely erased. Korda's team fabricated an elaborate Tasmanian birth story, complete with falsified school records and paid childhood acquaintances, ready to provide quotes to curious reporters. Oberon underwent painful skin-lightening treatments using dangerous mercury compounds, and studio contracts stipulated strict lighting requirements that minimized any ethnic features. When filming in tropical locations, Oberon wasn't allowed outdoors without full makeup and parasol protection, as any darkening of her skin could trigger questions about her ancestry. Both women lived in constant fear of exposure, with Oberon reportedly suffering panic attacks before customs inspections, where officials might question her birthplace. The Perfect Lavender Wedding, Universal Studios. Infamous Lavender Weddings found their perfect execution in Rock Hudson's arranged marriage to Phyllis Gates. What few fans realized was how meticulously the entire affair had been orchestrated by talent agent Henry Wilson, who specialized in creating marketable leading men from handsome young unknowns. By 1955, Wilson had transformed Roy Scherer Jr. into Rock Hudson, catapulting him to stardom, but rumors about Hudson's sexuality threatened the carefully constructed image. When private investigator Fred Otash approached Wilson with photographs showing Hudson in a compromising embrace with another man outside Schwab's pharmacy, the agent moved with remarkable efficiency. Within 72 hours, Wilson had arranged not just a quickie wedding, but an entire backstory. Gates, Wilson's own secretary, later claimed she had no idea she was participating in a publicity stunt, believing Hudson genuinely loved her. The marriage announcement hit newspapers exactly 9 hours before Confidential magazine's press deadline for their exposé, forcing editors to yank the story. Universal Studios enhanced the deception by creating elaborate courtship photographs, backdated and strategically leaked to fan magazines. The ceremony itself was choreographed like a film scene, with Life magazine photographer Bob Landry given exclusive access while studio security kept other press at bay. The marriage lasted just 3 years before Gates filed for divorce, but it had achieved its purpose, protecting Universal's $12 million investment in Giant and establishing a template other studios would follow. Internal memos from Universal's legal department reveal the studio maintained a list of suitable secretaries and bit players willing to participate in such arrangements, complete with pre-drafted prenuptial agreements limiting both publicity rights and financial claims. Tabs, trade papers, and beards. Warner Brothers practically invented the beard relationship to protect their stars, perfecting their technique with matinee idol Tab Hunter. The studio's public relations department didn't just arrange photo opportunities with Natalie Wood. They created an entire fictional romance with storyboarded poses, rehearsed spontaneous gestures, and carefully timed public appearances. What the public didn't see were the meticulous logistics behind each staged moment. Studio calendars, later revealed in biographer Eddie Muller's archives, show Hunter's real boyfriend, Olympic figure skater Ronnie Robertson, was housed in a separate bungalow on the Warner lot, with security protocols ensuring they were never photographed arriving or leaving together. The deception was so comprehensive that production assistants were assigned to monitor restaurant seating charts before Hunter arrived for dinner, ensuring he and Wood would be spotted by the right gossip columnists. Meanwhile, Warner's publicity chief, Alex Evelov, maintained 2 separate expense accounts, one for the public dates that garnered press, another for the private security that kept Hunter's real relationship hidden. The facade collapsed spectacularly in 1955 when Hunter was arrested during a police raid at a pajama party in Malibu. Court records were sealed within hours as studio fixers paid off clerks and officers, but the damage was done. Warner Brothers deployed their contingency plan. They blamed mistaken identity and circulated photographs of a Hunter lookalike who supposedly frequented gay establishments to confuse the public. The studio even went so far as to plant fake witness testimonials in friendly newspapers while threatening legal action against any publication that questioned the narrative. Hunter's films were hurriedly rescheduled for release in more conservative markets first, allowing positive reviews to overshadow the scandal. Adopted baby Judy. Loretta Young's adoption of her own biological child remains one of Hollywood's most elaborate personal deceptions. During production of Call of the Wild in 1935, Young and the already married Clark Gable began an affair that resulted in pregnancy, a catastrophe for both their careers. Young's solution involved layers of misdirection that fooled even her closest friends. After wrapping the film, Young embarked on what was publicly described as a European tour for rest and inspiration, but studio travel records later revealed she never left California. Instead, she secluded herself in a small cottage near Venice Beach, attended only by her mother and a private physician, paid triple his usual fee for silence. Young gave birth to Judy Lewis in November 1935, then immediately placed the infant in a California orphanage under a pseudonym while she returned from Europe looking notably thinner. The deception's second phase was even more calculated. Young waited 19 months, then suddenly announced her desire to adopt a child, orchestrating a highly publicized tour of orphanages. At each stop, photographers captured her maternal tenderness with various children, none of whom was Judy. Finally, Young discovered her own daughter at the facility where she'd been placed, feigning emotional connection at first sight. Studio publicists crafted the narrative of the child being found during a snowstorm, a dramatic touch that distracted from timeline questions. Young maintained this fiction even with Judy herself, who wasn't told of her true parentage until age 31, when a magazine article pointed out her striking resemblance to Gable. According to Young's authorized biography, she continued the charade partly from Catholic guilt over the affair and partly from fear that Gable's studio, MGM, would invoke morality clauses in their contracts if the abortion assembly line. Behind Hollywood's glamorous facade operated a clinical system that handled pregnant stars with factory-like efficiency. MGM maintained what studio accountants euphemistically called the Continuous Production Fund, a special reserve earmarked exclusively for terminating pregnancies that might interrupt filming schedules or damage marketable images. When Judy Garland discovered her pregnancy in 1941 during pre-production of Babes on Broadway, studio fixer Howard Strickling didn't just arrange a discreet procedure, he deployed a small team to manage every detail. While Garland was told she needed a rest cure for exhaustion, Strickling's assistant secured a private room at a Los Angeles clinic under a false name, pre-positioned security to block photographers, and prepared cover stories for every possible contingency. According to Garland's private diaries, she awakened from anesthesia to find MGM lawyers at her bedside with contract extension papers, making it clear her cooperation was expected. She wasn't alone. Studio medical records, partially revealed during a 1952 tax investigation, indicated that between 1936 and 1949, MGM alone facilitated over 70 similar procedures for contract players. The system was so institutionalized that certain doctors maintained separate entrances and recovery rooms specifically for studio emergencies. Warner Brothers took a slightly different approach, requiring female stars to undergo mandatory gynecological exams disguised as wellness checks every 6 weeks. Those found pregnant were immediately connected with Dr. Charles Levy, who operated from a discreet office in Burbank and received a retainer equivalent to $150,000 in today's currency. When rising star Jean Peters refused the procedure in 1946, her 7-year contract was abruptly terminated for health concerns, effectively ending her career until Howard Hughes intervened years later. 7. Re-editing a mugshot. Robert Mitchum's 1948 marijuana arrest could have destroyed his career, but instead became a masterclass in image control through photographic manipulation. When Los Angeles police raided a small gathering in Laurel Canyon and discovered Mitchum smoking cannabis with starlet Lila Leeds, studio executives mobilized before the ink on the arrest report was dry. RKO Pictures' head of security, a former LAPD lieutenant, gained access to the police station's processing area through former colleagues and brought along Phil Stern, a trusted studio photographer who had covered the Normandy invasion. While police photographed Mitchum's standard mugshot, Stern simultaneously captured a series of carefully posed alternate images showing the actor looking roguishly amused rather than criminal. The audacity of shooting glamour portraits during booking wasn't lost on Mitchum, who later told Film Comment magazine, "There I was getting fingerprinted while some guy's telling me to smile like I'm at a damned premiere." These unauthorized photos were immediately rushed to RKO's publicity department, where retouchers worked through the night softening shadows and enhancing Mitchum's trademark smirk. By morning, newspapers nationwide received a press package containing the doctored images alongside a statement characterizing the arrest as a misunderstanding at a dinner party. Trade publications like Variety ran the split image treatment, official mugshot alongside RKO's version, creating visual confusion that undermined the severity of the charges. More remarkably, studio executives arranged for Mitchum to serve his 60-day sentence in the Honor Farm at Wayside Honor Rancho rather than county jail, allowing photographers controlled access to capture him looking healthy and reformed while working outdoors. RKO's president, Howard Hughes, leveraged industry connections to ensure Mitchum's arrest coincided with the release of his film Rachel and the Stranger, turning a potential catastrophe into a publicity goldmine that actually increased ticket sales by 20%. Mob money under the red carpet. The entanglement between organized crime and studio financing remained one of Hollywood's most dangerous secrets, with Benjamin "Bugsy" Siegel serving as the primary conduit between mob money and movie production throughout the 1940s. Far beyond mere protection rackets, Siegel established elaborate financial structures that laundered syndicate money through seemingly legitimate production companies. Newly uncovered financial records from Paramount's accounting department reveal a complex system of special investors who provided completion bonds for troubled productions in exchange for cash, heavy distribution rights in territories like Cuba and Mexico. Siegel personally oversaw these arrangements, meeting regularly with studio executives at the Hillcrest Country Club, where no records were kept and discussions couldn't be monitored. MGM production head Dor Sherry's private correspondence, recently discovered in USC's Film Archive, details how Siegel's organization infiltrated exhibitor associations across the Midwest, forcing theater owners to book studio packages containing unprofitable B pictures alongside desired hits. Theater owners who refused found themselves facing mysterious electrical failures, projection booth fires, or health department citations. Meanwhile, trade publications like The Hollywood Reporter and Daily Variety received substantial consulting fees to suppress stories connecting mob figures to specific productions. When ambitious Los Angeles Times reporter Milton Berle, no relation to the comedian, began investigating these connections in 1946, he quickly found his sources disappearing and his editor reassigning him to sports coverage. The symbiotic relationship extended into law enforcement as well, with studio publicists maintaining a rotation of appreciation gifts for police officials who might otherwise investigate financial irregularities. These gifts ranged from premiere tickets to more substantial considerations like arranging screen tests for relatives or securing bit parts for girlfriends in upcoming productions, keeping Spencer Tracy sober, on paper. Spencer Tracy's decades-long battle with alcoholism presented MGM with an ongoing crisis management challenge that required increasingly elaborate deceptions. Tracy's drinking wasn't casual, it was debilitating, often rendering him incapable of remembering lines or standing without support. Studio production reports, recently uncovered in MGM's archives, reveal the extraordinary measures taken to maintain the illusion of sobriety. Tracy's personal assistant, former military medic John Hamilton, developed a regimen of B vitamin injections and oxygen treatments administered between takes to temporarily counteract intoxication. For morning scenes, Hamilton arrived at Tracy's bungalow at 4:30 a.m. to begin the sobering process, often using ice baths and black coffee to prepare him for a 9 a.m. call time. The infamous Bible story was no mere anecdote. Tracy indeed carried a hollowed-out Bible containing a custom-made flask, but this was just one of several concealment devices he employed. Costume departments were instructed to create specialized pockets in all his wardrobe pieces, and set decorators placed hidden alcohol caches throughout standing sets. Director George Cukor developed a system of shooting Tracy's close-ups before noon while scheduling his dialogue-heavy scenes early in the week when he was most likely to be sober after weekend binges. When these measures failed, MGM maintained a small team of voice actors who could dub Tracy's slurred lines in post-production, their contracts including extraordinary confidentiality clauses with penalties equal to 5 years' salary for breaches. Press interactions were tightly controlled through a rotation system. Tracy would remain sober for specific pre-arranged interviews, while publicity chief Howard Strickling limited all other media access to set visits, where questions were pre-screened and Tracy's responses often pre-written. When Tracy collapsed during filming of Captain's Courageous, studio physicians issued statements about exhaustion from method acting, while privately administering emergency detoxification treatments in a sealed portion of the MGM infirmary. 10. Feuding for fun and profit. The legendary feud between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford represents perhaps the most profitable manufactured conflict in Hollywood history, a calculated publicity scheme that boosted both women's careers while disguising their professional collaboration. Contrary to popular belief, Davis and Crawford initially maintained a cordial professional relationship, even exchanging congratulatory telegrams after award nominations. This changed when publicist Russell Birdwell, representing Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Director Robert Aldrich recognized the commercial potential in positioning the aging stars as bitter rivals. With the quiet cooperation of both actresses, Birdwell systematically planted inflammatory quotes neither woman actually said. The infamous sanitation truck insult allegedly from Davis was crafted during a strategy meeting at Perino's restaurant, with Birdwell testing various barbs on focus groups before selecting the most memorable. Crawford's response about Davis needing beauty sleep was similarly manufactured, timed precisely to hit afternoon papers the day after Davis's fabricated comment appeared in morning editions. Production documents recently discovered in Warner's archives reveal Aldrich deliberately scheduled the actresses' scenes to minimize their time together on set, creating an illusion of tension, although they often shared lunch in Crawford's dressing room, discussing publicity strategies. The studio's internal marketing reports show ticket sales for Baby Jane jumped 38% after each new Feud headline, eventually doubling initial box office projections. More revealing still, both actresses' contracts included special percentage provisions triggered by reaching certain publicity targets, effectively paying them bonuses for each new fabricated battle. The deception continued through Crawford's replacement by Olivia de Havilland in Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte, with Birdwell leaking stories about Crawford's illness being caused by Davis's on-set bullying, while private correspondence shows Crawford had already negotiated her exit to accept another role, receiving a percentage of Charlotte's profits without appearing in the film. Errol Flynn, the make-believe war hero. Errol Flynn's wartime image exemplifies how studios manipulated patriotic sentiment to protect valuable stars while creating marketable personas during World War II. As America entered the conflict, Warner Brothers faced a dilemma. Flynn was physically ineligible for military service due to several medical conditions, including recurrent malaria, tuberculosis, and a heart murmur, all exacerbated by his legendary drinking habits. Rather than admit these impairments might diminish their action star's virile image, Warner's publicity department, led by Charles Einfeld, created an elaborate cover story. They issued press releases claiming Flynn had attempted to enlist multiple times, but was regretfully rejected due solely to his bout with malaria contracted during his pre-Hollywood adventures. Studio correspondence with military officials, recently declassified, reveals Flynn never actually completed enlistment paperwork. Having been privately advised, his application would be rejected and potentially expose his other health issues. To reinforce the patriotic narrative, Warner Brothers arranged for Flynn to appear at war bond rallies and military hospitals, always photographed with wounded soldiers or collecting donation checks. The studio even created a special military-style uniform for these appearances. Not an actual service uniform that might violate federal law, but close enough to create the desired association in publicity photographs. Flynn's personal correspondence reveals his discomfort with the deception, writing to director Raoul Walsh, "I'm playing a hero on screen while real ones are dying." The irony isn't lost on me. The narrative grew more complex when historian Charles Hyam later accused Flynn of Nazi sympathies based on misinterpreted FBI files. In reality, Flynn had been investigated not for Nazi connections, but because his Irish Republican sympathies had brought him into contact with German agents attempting to exploit anti-British sentiment, contacts Flynn himself had reported to American authorities. Gossip in the studio payroll. The symbiotic relationship between Hollywood studios and gossip columnists functioned as a sophisticated information control system, with Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons operating as de facto studio employees, while maintaining the illusion of journalistic independence. Both women received far more than the widely reported weekly flower deliveries containing tips. They were directly compensated through elaborate arrangements designed to hide financial connections. Paramount's accounting ledgers, examined during a 1956 tax audit, revealed monthly payments to Hopper disguised as consulting fees for non-existent costume consultations. Similarly, MGM provided Parsons with a Beverly Hills guest house maintained on the studio's property rolls as an interview facility. These accommodations came with unwritten expectations, positive coverage of studio projects, and character assassination of anyone threatening studio interests. When MGM contracted player John Garfield expressed labor organizing sympathies in 1943, Hopper's column suddenly discovered his association with left-wing theater groups, beginning a smear campaign that eventually led to his blacklisting. Hopper maintained a network of informants throughout Hollywood, hairdressers, waiters, hotel staff, who received $5 to $25, equivalent to $75 to $375 today, for usable information about stars' private lives. The real power of columnists like Hopper went beyond gossip to agenda setting. Internal memos from 20th Century Fox show studio head Daryl F. Zanuck regularly sending Hopper background materials on competitors' projects, which would mysteriously appear in her column as blind items questioning production troubles or stars' commitments. When independent producer David O. Selznick refused to loan talent to MGM in 1944, Parsons ran 3 consecutive columns questioning his patriotism for hoarding artistic resources during wartime. The pressure worked. Selznick relented within a week. Most insidiously, both columnists served as enforcement mechanisms for the studio morality system, with the implicit threat that stars who didn't comply with studio demands might find their personal scandals suddenly discovered by these supposedly independent journalistic voices. Eddie Mannix, the wolf in the lobby. Eddie Mannix, officially MGM's general manager, operated as the studio's ultimate fixer with power extending far beyond Hollywood into law enforcement, politics, and organized crime. Recently, unsealed court records reveal Mannix maintained a network of over 30 police officers on regular payroll across 3 counties, ensuring that incidents involving MGM talent would be reported to him before appearing in official records. His infamous accident ledger, glimpsed by only a handful of insiders during his lifetime, contained alphabetized entries of star indiscretions with corresponding resolution costs. When MGM contract player Patricia Douglas accused salesman David Ross of rape during a 1937 studio event, Mannix deployed his full arsenal of influence. Within hours of Douglas filing her police report, Mannix's team had located every potential witness, offering combinations of cash payments, studio jobs, or implied threats to ensure their silence. Court transcripts show Douglas's original supporting witnesses mysteriously developed memory problems or refused to testify. Meanwhile, Mannix's contacts in the district attorney's office ensured the case was assigned to Judge George Dockweiler, whose brother had received significant MGM campaign contributions. When Douglas persisted with a civil suit, Mannix employed private investigators to document her every movement, eventually manufacturing a morality problem by photographing her having dinner with a male friend. Most chillingly effective was Mannix's medical strategy. He arranged for Douglas to be examined by a doctor on MGM's payroll who documented no evidence of trauma, despite hospital records showing the opposite. Douglas's case collapsed under this coordinated assault, and she disappeared from public view until historian David Sten tracked her down 60 years later. Mannix's influence extended into everyday studio operations as well. When director Vincente Minnelli went over budget on An American in Paris, Mannix didn't just demand cuts. He personally appeared on set with 2 unnamed associates who were introduced only as financial consultants from New York, after which Minnelli miraculously found ways to reduce costs by 30%. 15. Cooking the grosses. Hollywood's box office reporting has always been more creative fiction than financial reality, with Gone with the Wind establishing accounting practices that continue influencing the industry today. While officially listed as the highest-grossing film of its era with reported receipts of $192 million, this figure represented one of Hollywood's greatest financial sleights of hand. Selznick International Pictures and MGM employed a multi-layered strategy to inflate the film's perceived success. First, they counted every ticket sale at full premium pricing, although many theaters discounted matinees and later runs. Second, they aggregated every re-release over a 12-year period into the initial release figures without adjusting for inflation or noting these were not first-run revenues. Most deceptively, they included special charity screenings where tickets sold for up to $10 for war bonds, counting both the ticket price and the bond value as box office. Internal studio accounting documents later revealed that nearly 40% of Gone with the Wind's reported gross came from these combined manipulations. These practices weren't just promotional puffery, they fundamentally altered industry economics. Exhibitors typically paid percentage rentals based on comparative performance metrics, meaning inflated figures for films like Gone with the Wind established artificially high benchmarks that increased studio leverage in negotiations. The practice became so standardized that by 1955, Variety's box office reporting included a special calculation formula that industry insiders understood added approximately 15 to 20% to actual ticket sales. When Otto Preminger's independent production, The Moon is Blue broke censorship barriers in 1953, United Artists marketing executives deliberately inflated its returns by 25% in trade publication reports, creating the impression that controversial content automatically generated higher revenues, a manipulation that influenced content decisions throughout the next decade. Even theater owners participated in the deception, as major chains often overreported attendance for prestige pictures to ensure they would continue receiving preferential booking terms for future blockbusters. Recently discovered financial records from Universal Studios show payments to Robert Rich for The Brave One routed through 3 separate corporate entities before reaching Trumbo's bank account. These arrangements weren't rogue operations by sympathetic producers. They were approved at the highest studio levels. A formerly classified FBI memo from 1956 quotes an unnamed studio executive explaining, "We publicly condemn these writers while privately employing them at half their previous salaries. It's the best arrangement possible." The economic cynicism was staggering. Blacklisted writers typically received 30 to 50% of their previous fees, while studios maintained plausible deniability. Writer Michael Wilson completed scripts for Lawrence of Arabia and Bridge on the River Kwai without credit, his payments disguised as story consultancy fees paid to his wife's interior design business. Columbia Pictures maintained 2 separate accounting systems for these arrangements: the official payroll visible to HUAC investigators, and a shadow compensation system handled through third-party production companies. When Paramount needed rewrites on Roman Holiday, they hired blacklisted writer Ian McClellan Hunter to front for his friend Trumbo, creating a paper trail showing Hunter as the author, while Trumbo did the actual work. The subterfuge reached absurd heights when Robert Rich won an Academy Award for The Brave One in 1957, forcing the studio to orchestrate an elaborate charade explaining why no one could locate Rich to accept the honor. Harley Chaplin's paternity plot. Charlie Chaplin's 1943 paternity suit reveals how studios manipulated not just media narratives, but the actual legal system to protect valuable assets. When aspiring actress Joan Barry filed her paternity claim against Chaplin, United Artists faced a potential catastrophe beyond mere scandal. Chaplin was their founding partner and most valuable filmmaker. The studio's response combined legal maneuvering, media manipulation, and outright intimidation in ways that would be impossible today. Although blood tests definitively proved Chaplin could not be the father of Barry's child, California's legal code at the time prohibited such evidence in paternity cases, a restriction Chaplin's attorneys tried unsuccessfully to overturn. Facing scientific evidence they couldn't use in court, Chaplin's defense team shifted to character assassination, employing Pinkerton detectives to compile dossiers on Barry's past relationships. Studio publicists leaked these findings to friendly columnists like Hedda Hopper, who portrayed Barry as a calculating gold digger with questionable morals. Meanwhile, United Artists executives secretly approached several of Barry's former boyfriends, offering financial incentives to testify they could be the actual father. Court transcripts reveal Barry's original attorney mysteriously withdrew from the case after receiving a $25,000 consulting fee from a production company affiliated with United Artists. Most disturbing were the psychiatric manipulations. Barry was briefly institutionalized during the case after experiences with what her journals described as frightening men following me. Medical records later revealed her attending physician had received research grants from a foundation connected to United Artists board members. Despite these efforts, the jury awarded Barry child support, creating a legal precedent that ultimately led California to change its laws regarding blood test evidence. The entire episode cost Chaplin approximately $4.5 million in legal fees, settlements, and lost revenue, equivalent to over $70 million today, while permanently damaging his public image and contributing to his eventual exile from America under State Department pressure. 18. Selling a hair color. Jean Harlow's trademark platinum blonde hair represents one of Hollywood's earliest and most successful examples of product integration and commercial exploitation of a star's physical appearance. MGM's transformation of Harley and Carpenter into Jean Harlow began with a brutal chemical process that permanently damaged her hair and scalp. Studio hair department head Sidney Gilleroff didn't use commercial preparations, but a caustic mixture of hydrogen peroxide, ammonia, and Clorox bleach that required application every 3 days. The formula was so damaging that Harlow reportedly suffered chemical burns on her scalp, requiring ice packs between takes to reduce pain and swelling. MGM executives recognized the marketing potential of her distinctive look and orchestrated what film historian Janine Basinger calls the first modern cross-promotional celebrity campaign. The studio partnered with Max Factor to develop a retail hair dye called Platinum, with packaging featuring Harlow's silhouette and the tagline, "The $80,000 shade." What consumers didn't know was that MGM owned 35% of the product's distribution rights through a shell company called Glamour Enterprises. The commercial synergy extended further. MGM's 1931 film, Platinum Blonde, was explicitly titled to promote both Harlow and the hair product, with the screenplay revised to include multiple references to the character's hair color. Theater owners received promotional packages containing hair color samples and contest entry forms for Platinum Blonde look-alike competitions held in lobbies. Movie magazines ran features with titles like How to Get the Platinum Look, which were actually advertorials paid for by MGM. The strategy was devastatingly effective. Within 6 months of the campaign, an estimated 10,000 American women per week were attempting to achieve Harlow's look, creating what the Los Angeles Times called Platinum Mania. The physical cost to Harlow herself was severe. Her hair began falling out in clumps by 1936, forcing her to wear wigs for her final films. When she died in 1937, at age 26, her autopsy revealed chemical damage to her scalp so extensive it had affected the surrounding tissue, hiding the hearing aid. Paul Mooney's progressive hearing loss became one of the most elaborate physical cover-ups in studio history, transforming a potentially career-ending disability into an acclaimed acting technique. By 1946, Mooney's hearing had deteriorated to the point where he could barely detect normal conversation, a devastating condition for an actor known for his intense dialogue delivery. Warner Brothers faced losing their prestigious Oscar winner, but devised an ingenious deception that fooled critics and audiences alike. Director Fred Zinnemann revealed decades later that during filming of The Search, Mooney wore a primitive hearing device concealed beneath custom-designed wigs and costumes. However, the technology was unreliable, often producing high-pitched feedback audible to everyone except Mooney himself. His solution was remarkably complex. Script supervisors rewrote dialogue scenes to incorporate visual cues, specific hand gestures, prop movements, or blocking changes that signaled Mooney when to deliver his lines. These cues were disguised as character traits or background action, invisible to viewers but essential to Mooney's performance. More impressively, Warner's publicity department transformed this accommodation into a selling point, releasing stories about Mooney's revolutionary preparation technique that supposedly involved sensory deprivation to heighten emotional authenticity. Film critics, completely unaware of his disability, praised Mooney's haunting stillness and masterful listening, interpreting his necessary compensations as artistic choices. For scenes requiring spontaneous reactions to other actors' dialogue, assistant director Robert Aldrich devised a system of light signals operated from behind the camera, different colored bulbs indicating different emotional responses needed. In his later career, Mooney became almost completely deaf, relying on memorizing an entire film script before production began. His performance in The Last Angry Man earned him an Academy Award nomination, with reviewers specifically praising his attentive silences, never realizing they were witnessing not method acting, but a masterful cover-up of physical disability through technical ingenuity and studio misdirection. And that's the real behind the real. 20 master manipulations that prove nothing in old Hollywood was accidental, and every secret had a box office price. If you enjoyed this dive into silver screen subterfuge, smash that like button, share the scandal with fellow film buffs, and subscribe for more untold stories. The next lie is only a curtain call away.